identity started to shift. Now, like you said, I was in magazines and was traveling the world and was on stage competing. I wish there was a moment where I said to myself, or someone said to me, like, hey, like, we need to stop this now before it gets out of control. Like, the door was open, but the door was open to just me, right? I was in a toxic relationship.
Understood.
And it was, the door's open for you, but not the other person.
Help me welcome our guest, Cristina. What's good?
Hello, how are you?
What's good? Good. So for our guests who don't know you, as long as I've known you, give us a little bit of background of you.
Yeah, so I grew up in the St. Louis area. Well, I think Cole even said it, on the east side, like on the Illinois side, right?
Right.
Grew up on the Illinois side. I grew up in church my entire life. Like, I do not have a bad memory of my childhood. Like, I was raised in church. Like, I always say, like, when the doors are open and when the doors were closed, like, we were there.
Yeah.
I was raised in this beautiful home and went to Belleville East and graduated there, and then went to Northern Illinois University outside of Chicago. And so I honestly, kind of off and on, I stayed up there for a good, like, 13 years or so. And it was then when I had some tough stuff happen and started to turn my focus away from God. Mm-hmm. Spoiler alert, everything falls apart when we do that.
Amen. Right.
Literally everything started to fall apart. And then, I know we'll get into a lot of my story too, but, I got into the fitness industry and was pretty successful pretty quick, and had great opportunities and endorsements and sponsorships and all that, traveled the world and did really well. But again, when I got my eyes off God and got my eyes off Christ and completely lost my identity throughout that entire thing. Yeah. And when that happened, everything kind of snowballed into just absolute pure chaos. There's no other way to describe it. But, by the grace of God, I'm here now. Yeah. And God has truly restored and redeemed every single thing that the enemy took from me. Yeah. And, I live in the St. Louis area still now. I came back here from Chicago and turned my life around. And I've got an awesome husband. Awesome job. I've got 3 stepkids, 3 boys. Yeah. So my life is busy all the time. Yeah. With kids. Yeah. But it's absolutely good. I love it.
No, I feel that. No, and that's and it was cool to know just how fast. Cool in the sense of, like, once I got a chance to, like, know, like, oh, she's doing fitness stuff or whatever. Yeah. Like I was like, oh man, fitness was, at least as far as I know, never like a thing necessarily, right?
Oh no.
When I knew you, no. and so obviously, just like anything else, right? How social media is. By the time I finally actually saw it, it's like, oh, okay, well, this is the thing that's been a process, and then here she is, she's all over, and so I was like, oh man, this is really cool. And so to hear your story about how. Obviously coming from a very supportive family too. Like that's one thing I definitely remember, where I was like, oh no, like we family. Like everybody here is very involved with one another and supportive of one another. And so, with your story, and we could take this conversation however it is, wherever you want to go, timeline, whatever. My brain, when it comes to timeline, is not very linear. So, however you want to jump around, but I guess just talk about the process of knowing that you were in a very supportive home, and the foundations of how you were raised, what that transition looked like. Because I feel like some people kind of do a, like, whoa, like, I'm here now. Like, how did I get here? It went so fast, right? Mm-hmm. And then hindsight, when we kind of walk back and we go, okay, had I not done this, this would have happened. Had I have done this more intentionally, this would have been better, right? And so, so could you kind of talk us through that portion? Because I know there's some people who, rather themselves or even like some loved ones, where they're like, man, I can see that this is going to be happening in their future. So what are some things that I should be looking for, and how can I interact during those times appropriately? Because I'm sure during this transition that you were going through, that had somebody maybe said something a certain way or direct or whatever, your heart may not have been ready for it. So kind of talk us through that.
That's a good question. And this is exciting for me to talk about. And makes me a little bit nervous because there's been a lot of parts of my story that I've been like super open and transparent about.
Yeah.
I've struggled with addiction in my life and all of the things that come with that. And I am just like an open book. And so this is the first time I'm actually like talking about that kind of season of my life. So this is great. It's a great question. So to go back a little bit, I went to NIU. I had this dream of working in broadcast journalism. I was an overachiever. That's what I wanted to do my entire life.
Yes, I remember the journalism for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, I remember being a kid. I was watching the news at 5 years old, right? Like that was cool for me. And so I went like gung ho. I was working at a TV station at my university. I eventually got a job freelancing for kind of a subset of WGN in Chicago. I was working at the Chicago Tribune building on Michigan Avenue. I was like, this is the dream. Yeah. And I was dating someone at the time, and they were going to the gym. And you are so right. I never went to the gym a day in my life. I walked the mile in 12 minutes. Like that was the extent of my my workout. I never did anything.
Yeah.
But he was going to the gym every night, and I was like, I guess I could probably do this. And then I realized quickly, like I had a good metabolism, and I was like, oh, like I'm actually seeing results pretty quick. And it honestly just started as a hobby. But to your point, it happened so fast that I don't even think my family understood what it could turn into, because I didn't understand what it could turn into. And I'm dating myself now, but back then, influencers weren't really a thing yet online.
Yep.
I think I was one of the first like amateur competitors who even had like a fan page, like back when they were called fan pages.
Yes.
You didn't have to still have your college, email address yet. I was older than that, but to get onto Facebook. But anyway, so I think like it was just so new that I couldn't predict what it would turn into. Right. And eventually, I would get a sponsorship and an endorsement, and I was traveling, and then had gotten asked to travel to Australia. And as a, young 20-something, like, I'm not going to say no to that.
Right.
Like,
yes.
Free trip to Australia.
Absolutely.
Like, this is amazing. And I'd never, been really anywhere off the continent except to, Puerto Rico a couple of times. And so I then, and unfortunately at this time, I was starting to take my eyes off of God a little bit. I had some hurt in the church. So instead of, just leaving a church, I got mad at God. And so I just decided, like a lot of us do, that, well, I could just have my own relationship with God and not have fellowship with people. And again, it doesn't work out that way. That's not how God designed us to be. But because of that, I just thought I could do my own thing and then wouldn't consult the Lord in the decisions I was making. And I also think, as supportive as my family was, I don't think they knew how far I had kind of turned away from God, that I wasn't asking God for direction and guidance and wisdom in the decisions I was making.
Yeah.
And so it came to this crossroad where it was, well, all of this fitness stuff is really starting to take off, but so is my journalism and broadcasting career.
Oh, at the same time.
All at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, well, now I don't know what to do.
Right.
And I thought, well, I don't know when I'll ever have a chance to travel the world and do all of this. And I'll probably make less money starting out in journalism because it's not lucrative when you first start. And I thought, well, I'm just going to do this. This is going to be my new dream.
I mean, logically, it made sense.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And it was it was flashy. It was
that's
flashy
true.
and fun. I wasn't sitting in 2 hours worth of traffic to get to work.
Right.
I wasn't busted my butt. I was like, oh, I'm going to get paid to go to the gym. This is great. I'm getting paid to travel all over the place. This is wonderful.
Sign me up.
Yeah, right. But I think like what the one thing, I think my parents were always very supportive. My entire family, not just my parents, like my extended family, like you said, like we're family. Like, and if you're friends with our family, like you are family, right? You're close. And I think everybody just wanted me to be happy, and they saw that I was happy. And I don't know that anyone really dug into where I was spiritually, which I think, and to no fault of their own, right? Like they didn't know. And I was also not being true either.
Right.
I wasn't being forthcoming with, well, I'm not really living the best life either.
Well, and that's the thing. And I wanted to just kind of hit that real quick is when you're talking about, they wanted me to be happy, right? And they saw that I was happy. And I like that you said, but I wasn't really necessarily being honest too, because like, yeah, you were happy on the outside, right? It looked, again, back put everything on paper. Logically,
Oh yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, she's traveling, she's doing all of this stuff, she's smiling. You could see her in, magazines and all that. So like, it just looks on surface that, hey, you're happy. And so I think that's important, because anytime somebody's like, well, I really want to help somebody, or or maybe you kind of feel guilty as a friend or family relative, where you're like, man, I wish I would have known. I didn't know what were the clues and cues that I could have, picked up on. And it's just like, man, you really can't.
Sometimes there's not any.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's not any clues,
Yeah.
And I think as wonderful as my family was, like, I was purposely trying to keep them from the sadness
Right.
that was happening,
Yes.
right? Like,
Yep.
I was being very intentional to not say when I was not happy, because I didn't want to disappoint my family, and I didn't want to disappoint myself.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, maybe I didn't make the right call. And I was like, nope, I'm an overachiever. I can make this thing work.
Yeah.
And, and again, taking my focus off of, truly the things that matter in life. Because at this point, right, my identity started to shift. Now, like you said, I was in magazines and was traveling the world and was on stage competing. And my image became everything. Everything. That became the God in my life.
So when that became that, when you started to notice, hey, this is going somewhere, I'm feeling good, dopamine hit like crazy because of all of the different experiences, attention, everything else. Was there, if you think back, was there any moments where there was still that like inside you of like, I know this is a little bit wrong, but you know what? Like, it'll be okay. Like any kind of like justification, I guess.
Oh yeah. And the only reason why I'm literally here today is because I always had that still small voice in the back of my head. The Lord like tapping me on the shoulder, like,
Wow.
And I think, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
As I look back, what I like to say, it would have been nice not to go through a lot of the hard stuff I went through, but I know that it was for a purpose and a reason.
Yeah.
And there's this redemption that comes after, where now I can help other people, right, that are going through the same thing. But there was absolutely a tug on my heart nonstop that the things I was doing was wrong. Because once and this isn't speaking ill of like the fitness industry as a whole, but your image becomes a certain thing. And so there are, substances to help you get to the next level. Yeah. And so that became part of my life. And then other, drugs became part of my life, and dealing with addiction, that then it's like, you're doing something wrong.
Right.
And again, it still wasn't enough. And this is something, I lead a Celebrate Recovery at our church, and we have to admit, this is part of step one, is that we have to admit we are powerless over our addictions and compulsive behaviors, and that our lives have become unmanageable.
Yeah.
And I thought I could control everything. Wow. Right. And I still deal with control issues. I still think I can control everything. God has told me, no, you can't. But I felt like even early on, like, well, I can control this. Yeah. Like, I can control the decisions I'm making. I know that I'm making the right call, and I know that this will be fine because, I'm the one in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. It is one of those things where we underestimate our ability to manage things, right? If if we're talking about even just time management, there's many of us, anybody would say, oh yeah, no, I could do this, and then oh crap, I forgot about this, or man, I was on a roll, I got everything on the grocery list, and then I forgot the bread. It's the only thing I forgot, and everything else I was killing it that day. Yeah. But it's like we underestimate how much we can actually manage and control, and therefore that's where also then the justification comes in, because of the fact that it's like, no, I can do this because I was able to do this. I was able to do that. Like, you start kind of doing this, and like you said, kind of becoming your own God, in the sense of like, I'm so able to get these opportunities are happening because of my personality.
100%.
My smile. You see me? Do you see me?
Yep.
Look at me. There's a reason why I'm getting called up.
I'm the one doing this, which means I can control this, and it means I can control the outcome.
And that's the thing. Like, even when you start to feel losing control, it's still no, I can get this.
Oh, absolutely.
I can get that. Wait, like, talk us through some moments where you were kind of in that, where like, okay, so you got the still small voice, you knew that there's certain things that you shouldn't do, the drugs and stuff. It's not just to clarify, it's not something that they said like, hey, you have to take it,
Oh,
right?
absolutely not.
Okay, so
Absolutely not.
so you were just presented with an option, knew in your heart, I really shouldn't be doing this. However, here I am. No, I got it. I can manage this. I'm in control. Before the, oh my gosh, downward spiral, I'm losing control. Talk us in that middle part where it's like you can kind of tell like, oh, I'm not able to really hold on right now. I can tell that there's some stuff really slipping in my personal life, whatever. But yet that struggle of, but no, I can still do this. Like, talk us through that point.
Oh yeah, it all came down to my circle, right? And the people that I was fellowshipping with, right? My friends, and it's not to say that they weren't all good people, right? And I have truly made amends with a lot of these folks, and they have also turned their lives around. But I think it came down to, you look at the expectations in the industry that I was in, and it's like, well, if everybody else is doing it, if I want to be successful, I think this is what I'm going to have to do too. So not peer pressure as in people telling you, but more like environmental pressure. Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because and at the time I was married to a professional bodybuilder also. Like this was our world.
Makes sense. You were in the culture.
I was in it. And when you're in it, it's like, well, you got to keep pushing. If you look at men bodybuilders, right? Arnold from, back in the day compared to the guys now.
Yep.
Completely different because physiques change, right? It's bigger, it's better, it's more lean, it's more symmetrical, it's this and that, and I felt like I just had to keep keeping up. And when you do that, you totally lose sight of why you even started in the first place. I was talking to my mom before I got here, and I was like, I remember when I first joined the gym, like I started going because, I was dating somebody. But as I got there, I was like, this is helping with my anxiety.
Yeah.
Like I'm able to channel my anxiety into like the next rep and the next set. And it was really like fulfilling for me when it was fun and a hobby. And I was able to do that. And then after a while, I was like, no, this whole thing is causing me anxiety now.
Wow.
It shifted because, you're just trying to be better and better and better.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so good. 'Cause it's like, for this scenario, it is something like we promote health, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like it is something that, man, if I do this and I do this well, there's a benefit both mentally, physically, and spiritually, depending on, how you go about it. And so, that's crazy because like you said, you got into it because you were kind of around the culture. However, you saw the positive benefits of it. And I think that's where any of us could kind of get slipped up, where it could be anything. So in a sense, the workout was a blessing for you, like getting into there, getting the anxiety out, right? Having some kind of peace, even if it's just within that moment, that you're doing your thing. And I think any of us could do that, where as far as the blessing, where God will bless us with, a car or, a house or whatever the case may be. And when we take our eyes off of how we got here, who we got here, what was the purpose from the very beginning, and then we start to shift it to like, I deserve this.
I'm working hard. I'm the one in the gym. I'm the one eating chicken and browned rice and broccoli. I'm the one eating eggs for 3 meals a day. I'm making this happen.
Yeah.
I look the way I do because of the work I'm putting in.
Wow.
And that's exactly what I thought.
So you get to a point where it was healthy, becoming unhealthy. Let's get closer to the turning point where you're realizing that I'm not able to manage this as well. It doesn't even have to be at the breaking point for you. You can talk us however you want, but I want to kind of know, like, when you started to notice of, I don't really have control, to like, no, I'm really losing control. Like this is starting to get really bad, but yet I'm not getting out. Cause my assumption is that you had realized it's getting bad, but didn't want to get out. Potentially, would you say, because this is kind of all you've known and this is kind of where your identity's wrapped up? Like talk me through that part.
Yeah. So it's crazy because I could see the writing on the wall, right? I could see things starting to crumble and I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And, my placing started to be not so good, but also I was, also just living a very unhealthy lifestyle altogether, right? There was substances that were more substances that were in my life. And, I think I knew that I couldn't sustain that. You don't know someone who's, using for that long and they're like 50, 60 years old. Something happens.
Yes.
Right. And so I think I could see the writing on the wall, but again, I still felt like I could control it.
Yeah.
I still felt like, well, it's okay. I can manage this. I can manage this. So there really wasn't a moment where I thought, and I wish there was, right? And this is what I hope happens for other women in particular, because I know, and I know men too, but like from a woman's perspective, if I had that moment that I was like, no, this is out of control. This is unhealthy. This is like hurting my body physically, when you're dieting that much and, losing water weight and taking diuretics and all of that, like it can get pretty unhealthy. There are healthy ways to do it, right? But it can get unhealthy. For me, it was. I wish there was a moment where I said to myself, or someone said to me, like, hey, like we need to stop this now before it gets out of control. Like you can retire now.
Yeah.
Even though I was young, like you can retire now and just live a totally normal, happy life, go back to work in the corporate world, all of that. That's what I wish would have happened, but that's not what happened.
Did you know, like, did it, so it didn't happen, but like, was anybody aware or were you just that good at putting on a front?
Oh, I was that good at putting on a front.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And looking back now, right, it wasn't that good of a front, you know, I and talking with my family afterwards, they're like, we knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what to do about it.
Ooh.
And it's hard because I started to then when things get so out of control, sometimes, we start to pull away, like we start to isolate because I didn't want to change my life.
Absolutely.
I didn't want to change my life.
Yeah.
I had all these things that had a hold on my life. I was like, well, I don't want to change anything.
Yeah.
But I also want to have a relationship with my family, but I don't want them to know how bad things are.
Yep.
So I'm just going to isolate a little bit. And so I kept pulling away. And God bless my family, man, because like if you don't believe that prayer changes lives, like
Amen.
my parents never stopped praying, and like they never enabled my behavior. They
That's
never justified anything for me. Absolutely not. And I always knew that if things got so out of control in my life that I could come back home. I knew that my parents' doors were always open.
Yeah.
And their arms were always open. So if parents are listening, I would say, always make sure like your kids know how much you are loved. That starts young. Like we were talking about, like I knew that from when I was young. Like my parents were going to be there. They're going to tough love on me sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm going to be real mad at them sometimes because of it. My mom's Puerto Rican and my dad's Serbian. They don't mince words. But yeah, like I wish they would. I wish they could have known a little bit more. But again, like I know I'm here and can do something with it. Yeah. But kind of moving on to that next piece, like things got so out of control when it came to like addiction that I couldn't compete anymore. And that was a really tough moment because I was like, I had lost my house. I had cars repossessed. When you let that stuff into your life, like there's no such thing as recreational stuff, right? It's the enemy, you open the door like this much.
Yep.
People think like, oh, there's these gateways to, this downward spiral. Oh, it is so small. Like there is one small decision after one small decision after one small decision.
Yep.
And before you know it, like there is no light at the end of the tunnel. You are like grasping for air every second of your life. And that's truly what happened to me. Wow. That it was so dark and so bad. And like I said, losing houses, losing cars, losing my job, not being able to keep a job, and just like having no financial stability, and knowing that like I would still pray every once in a while, but not fully surrendering,
But I mean, gosh, just that part's really interesting because like normally, okay, so isolation is where we can be defeated, right? Sure. I mean, freaking just war stuff in general, right? right? If you are able to divide, you can conquer,
Yep.
right? And so if I can divide a person from their family, I can now manipulate them the way that I want them to. And so rather that's Satan, rather that's just the people around us, whatever it is, right? And so, but normally when you get so much of a gap between you and your loved ones or whoever, your support system and whatever your foundation was at the time, normally you get far enough where you don't recall it at all. And so it's interesting to hear you say that, you know, rather you felt like those prayers were like very submitted or not, like just the fact that you still like what would make you feel that, I guess, draw to call on the Lord in a prayer, even when you knew in your heart, like, I don't want to change anything, I just want you to make this better.
That's exactly what my prayers were. That it was, and I know, like, you see in movies and whatnot, it's like, Lord, if you get me out of this, I'll never do this thing ever again, and that was my prayer a lot of times. Wow. Right? You're going through like withdrawals and this and that, and it's, God, like, just, if you can just get me through this, like, somehow make this happen, and somehow everything would work out fine, but I wouldn't thank God for it, right? I would just... And looking back now, like how selfish of me to treat my Creator that way, right? Yeah. But I also know how gracious and merciful of a God that we have, that He didn't leave me even when I was not sincere in those prayers. They were not coming from a right place. Yeah. But I still knew He was there. Yeah.
No, man. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to be all over just because of what you just said about how gracious God is. Do you ever think or currently struggle with the feeling of guilt still from that time, even though you know you're forgiven?
Yeah, so it took me a long time to get there. I am there. And honestly, like, it was really working through forgiving other people that kind of contributed to some of the chaos in my life, right? Yeah. People around me. Yeah. My biggest struggle, honestly, because my parents, forgave me, for a lot of the bad decisions that I made that impacted them. My family was so loving and gracious when I like finally surrendered and was like, I got nothing. I need God to come scoop me up. Like they were arm in arm with God coming to scoop me up. Yeah. So I wouldn't say I ever really felt a lot of guilt or shame for that. Yep. And some of that, the little bit I worked through that. But honestly, my biggest struggle was forgiving myself. Was like, and I was talking to some ladies the other day about this. It was like, I almost had to like go to old Cristina and apologize to that college kid who had this dream and I ruined it. Wow. So I had to make amends almost like with my old self. Yeah. Because it took me a long time to like, I could forgive anyone else. I could ask for forgiveness for anyone else, but man, that like, I had to forgive myself for the things that I've done to me and the dreams that I feel like I thwarted in my life, you know, but it took some time. Yeah. It took some time. I am there now, right? Praise the God. Lord. Yeah. Yeah. I don't look at that. And that's why I'm truly an open book about a lot of this stuff. Yeah. Cause I'm like, shoot, man, if God can forgive me, like the creator of the universe, who I am made in his image, if he can forgive me, how dare I not forgive myself?
Amen. No. Yeah. And I like that perspective of like, wait a minute now. If he's saying, hey, you good,
you're good.
Like me beating myself up, that would be like us, not punishing one of our kids, and then they still go, nah, I gotta, go out here and mow the lawn, or I gotta go do the dishes. I gotta ground myself.
Sound so bad.
Right. Right. Totally different from parents, but you know what I'm talking about. Where it's just like,
yeah, it's like, I'm like, God's forgiven me, and it's like, no, let me continue to beat myself up over it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because then at that point, you're invalidating his forgiveness.
Yes. I think of it too, like in marriage, right? Like if my husband and I have a disagreement or something, and one of us has to apologize. Like if I'm like, I am so sorry for what I did, and then I spend a week like beating myself up and isolating myself and going down in depression, he'd probably be like, "Are you serious? We're good. Like we just move on. Let's go grab some dinner. Like we don't have to keep doing this. Like I love you unconditionally."
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, for
So that's
sure.
a very good point. Yeah.
So I just want to backtrack a little bit when you were talking about how it's important for parents and loved ones and anybody who is seeing anybody struggle with anything, whatever case may be, that they still find a safety net with you. And this is where I want to go back to is, and that you don't enable that because, as society has showed us for many years now, that they are blurring the lines of acceptance and love, right? In so many different ways. And so, and people who are not able to understand that I can truly love you, every aspect of you as a person, and totally disagree with what it is that you're doing. And you gonna hear it. When we connect, I'm gonna let you know, hey, what you up to? Oh, you still up to it? I don't really think you should be doing that, right? Okay. Now, may not have to harp on it, right? So I want to kind of go back on that because I love the fact that you felt their love, also understood they didn't enable you. How did they handle, though they didn't know like what words to say and how to handle it, whatever, how did they handle it in such a way where you're aware that they weren't okay with it, but they weren't like beating you over the head to the point where you're like, you know what, I'm just going to completely isolate myself from you guys because now I don't even like the way that I feel when I'm talking to y'all.
Sure. Yeah. So my parents were really good at setting boundaries, like very firm boundaries. And some of them I didn't want to hear, right? That there were some stipulations on the door was open, but the door was open to just me, right? I was in a toxic relationship and it was the door's open for you, but not the other person.
Yeah.
And that's tough, right? Especially when you're living in chaos and like you think that, that you've got all the answers and you think, oh, my parents are crazy. My family's crazy. So I think like very firm boundaries. Like I still could feel the love, right? They're still there for me, but it's like on these conditions. I'm friends with some other ladies who are in recovery and they're, they also struggle with enabling others. And it's like, they have a son or a daughter who's struggling like with alcohol. And it's like, you can stay with me. But if you relapse, we need to get you into a treatment facility. And if you don't go there, I can't help you. So it's like, I love you. Let me help you on that road. And I will go above and beyond to help you and support you, give you a place to stay, give you food, like love on you.
Yeah.
But it's within these guardrails.
Yeah.
And I think that's fair, right? Because also that prevents the other person, like the friend or a loved one or a sibling, from being codependent, right?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
that balance can get totally out of hand, where then it's almost harming you, the person that's trying to help, the others, and then you're both just in this mess.
Yeah.
So I think like very firm boundaries and guardrails are key. And honestly, like my parents prayed every day, all day, and didn't let up. And that if you don't know what to do, start there.
Yes, something that we all, especially in the Christian walk, will take for granted, that we forget the power of prayer. And it's and the reason why, I would say one of the reasons why we forget is because there's so many times there's no instant change.
Oh, right.
Like I 100% would pray way more if I say, hey God, I really just need the rain to stop, and all of a sudden stops. Like, appreciate you, homie. Thank you. You know what I mean? It's of course, if anything was like that super instant, then yeah, I'd be way more gung ho, to pray. But like, prayer, committing yourself to prayer, even in the midst of a storm, even in the midst of not seeing any change, really tests your own heart and your own submission. Are you truly submitted to your Lord? If you're not truly submitted to Him, then it'll show up, because your prayers will either become far more selfish, far less, right? Or it won't. It'll just stop all in general, because then you'll be like, well, why should I pray? Because every time I pray for this, like, ain't nothing happening anyway. So let me just leave that alone. So yeah, that's important.
And we're waiting for God to show us in the natural realm, right? The things that we see. What we don't see is everything happening on the spiritual side. All of those, I think of God being up there and like moving all these levers, right? Like all of the other things that are happening behind the scenes that we're not privy to see.
Yeah.
And I think about like, it's when we say, yes, no, or wait, and like no one wants the wait
Right.
answer from
Yeah.
God, right? I don't know if you know this, I'm probably going to mess this up, but I heard this illustration one time about the Chinese bamboo tree. Have you heard of this? So apparently you can plant a seed, you plant the Chinese bamboo tree, and you water it for the first year, nothing happens. You water it the second year, nothing happens. 5 years, nothing happens.
Yeah.
And the 6th year, it's like it sprouts something like 80, 90 feet in 5 days.
Yeah.
Because it needs that root system underneath to support what is going to be grown.
Yeah.
So anytime I know the Lord's telling me to wait, I'm just thinking of all the roots that like God is working out this whole system and this foundation. But I could totally see that point though. Like it's so hard to do that because it's not. And honestly, we live in an instant gratification world.
For sure.
If I want some Oreos delivered to my house in 30 minutes, they're going to be there.
Especially delivery. Good Lord. Everything.
They're going to be there.
Yeah.
So it's trusting that, the foundation that God is working out and like all of those roots, like he's doing something.
Yep.
We just don't get to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously talking about foundations, though you had a great foundation growing up, had you, with the opportunities of journalism and the fitness and all that, even though you're presented with both of them at the same time, had you have taken some time and allowed yourself to really put even more foundation, do you feel like had you gone the fitness route that you would have been able to do it in a better way? Or do you still feel like had I gone there at all at any point, I still would have maybe not gotten as far, but I could definitely still see I could probably have gone away from it.
Yeah, I think honestly, like if I look back now, granted, I'm very grateful for where I am now and the walk that I've walked because I wouldn't be living this beautiful life that I have now.
Right.
I would have never taken the chance to go into the fitness industry. Yeah.
Wow.
And it took a long time for me to accept that, like I said, me forgiving myself for like thwarting my own dreams. Cause there was for years where even when I was in the height of the fitness world and the bodybuilding world, like I would see my friends from college, like working at TV stations and like doing those things that there was no perfect world then for me because, I had this dream and I didn't pursue that. And that was my lifelong dream, childhood dream to go into journalism. And then I'm also in the fitness side and I'm seeing, I'm at point A, all of these other women are point Z. So it's going to take me a long time to get there too. So that's when you just lose who you are.
Wow.
So I would say that like, I probably wouldn't have gone that route if I would have taken a second to think about it and to pray about it and do the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, man, I didn't even think about that. Because it's, anytime something goes wrong, we do the woulda, coulda, shoulda anyways.
Of course.
Right. But when you finally do make the decision to do something and rather you see it flourishing or not, still being attached to what that woulda, coulda, shoulda I didn't even think about, like, it could still end up putting more negative fuel to the fire to like, well, I'm going to keep doing this because since they're doing all this and even though I could have been in that, watch me now though. Like, look what you're missing out on.
That's exactly. I'd never heard it put that way. That was all on the inside. You just put words to exactly what happened.
Wow.
Yeah, that it was like and I'll never forget this. Like I had our news director at my college, loved him. Amazing man. Like he taught me everything that I knew. I idolized him.
Yeah.
And when I did not go into broadcasting, I felt like I really disappointed him. Like really, really more than my parents, more than my family, more than my friends and coworkers. Like it was a really deep thing that I felt like, man, like he believed in me so much.
Yeah.
He knew that I would be successful and that I'd have this beautiful career. And now I'm doing this other thing. So I'm going to have to go even harder because like, look, like even though I didn't do this, but I'm just as good, if not better at this. The problem is it was all on the surface, right? It was all external. I was still incredibly broken and wasn't always happy, but I wanted everyone to think that I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like any other I coach gymnastics, and so it's like any other like coach relationship or any mentor relationship where it's like you somebody's pouring into you, and you're appreciative of that, and then when you know that you've disappointed them and you're not going the way that that they had seen for you because they see the potential in you, that work of, well, I want you to know that I'm not a loser, like I didn't I didn't all of a sudden, like, my choice in this may disappoint you, however now you're going to be very proud of everywhere else I'm going and be like, well, you know what, she would have been a great broadcaster, but look at her now.
Mm-hmm.
And having to almost tell yourself that, but then having to live a life that was opposite of that, of like, man, I want you to be proud, I want you to know that I've done all this stuff, but at home when the lights are off and I'm sitting by myself, I don't feel proud of myself at all.
And I wish I was still went the other direction. Yeah.
Man. So you get to the point where you're finally saying, hey, this is enough. I know it's not good for me. I physically can't even continue to do what it is that I'm doing. Let's take that turning point of what are the steps back, because anybody who's ever done any kind of wrong to a person, to whatever, sometimes it's we don't want to apologize. We're afraid to apologize. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if the forgiveness is actually going to be given to us or to ourselves or whatever. So there's so much unknown fear and tension. That's one aspect of it, of trying to come back from, right? Because you're from that point on, that turning point on is a comeback story. The rest of your life is a comeback story from that, right? So what did you have to, what struggles, what are things did you have to kind of encounter first when you started to get away from it completely? You came back to your parents, asked for forgiveness, trying to learn how to forgive yourself. Talk us through the steps and process. Like, what are some practical things that for someone who might be maybe on the turning point in their own life right now for whatever it is, that they're finding the connection with you, what would you kind of say to them? Like, hey, this is how I eased myself into it, or don't think like you can just jump back in and whatnot. So kind of talk us through that part.
Yeah. Number one is, man, you got to put your pride aside.
Amen.
You got to put your pride aside, because if you can, I realized later that I was living quite the prideful life, and I was full of a lot of self-righteousness. And I was like, I can't do that. Like, I have to just come completely broken to the people who I know love me.
Right.
First to God, right? I remember this moment. It was this realization that, like, I literally started my whole life over, right? I had nothing, like zero. I had negative things.
Wow.
Like, it was bad.
Yeah.
So I started my life completely over, and I had to put aside all of my pride and literally like actively rebuild my relationship with like my parents and my brother, and truly apologize specifically for the things that I had done to hurt them. And like one of my best friends, like, I had to have this come to Jesus moment with her, like me being like, I am so sorry for the things that I've done. So number one is I just had to admit that I messed up and like and truly for the first time be 100% honest with the questions people were asking me. Because I was like, I can't hide behind all of this stuff anymore. I just have to be vulnerable. And that's really uncomfortable when you've kind of been living a lie for a very long time.
Yeah. You've been lying so much that it's so natural. And so you're having to really fight, just the courage itself. You got to fight the mentality, because your brain wants to go, oh yeah, no, it's okay. Oh, this is okay.
For sure.
It wasn't that bad.
It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. And they're like, was it though?
Yeah.
Like, yes, it was bad. Yeah, that was a big thing. And also, like, I had to understand that, like, the decisions I made could impact my reputation just as a person.
Yeah.
I had to own up to that and be like, I know that people may look at me differently, and that's going to have to be okay.
Yeah.
Because I know there's redemption and there's a story that can come out of this, but for right now, in these moments, I have to remember, like, it's not about my reputation. It's not about any of that. It's not about what people think about me.
Right.
Like, I've got to get right with God and right with the people in my inner circle. So definitely, like, pride, putting that aside, absolutely being honest and vulnerable when you don't want to be. And also, like, not expecting everything's going to turn around overnight. Like you said, it is a slow process. Like, I remember, again, I had absolutely nothing. And like this first job that I got was like helping a friend of mine at his like landscaping business, working in, at their shop in an office for, cash money. It's, I was this professional, fitness competitor, and I've traveled the world. Do you know who I am? Your life does not care who you are when you're trying to rebuild it. It's like, you're going to put the work in,
Wow.
like God direct your steps, and you're going to do the grunt work to do it. And so I had to be willing to, once again, put my pride aside and be like, none of that stuff matters. Like, I don't need to care what other people think. I'm not about, trying to have this image anymore. Like, I just had to be authentically me. Like, who am I? And I learned who I was through those like small jobs. And then I got another job, and I lived in my parents' house for about a little under a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got my own apartment, and I got my own car. And then, I remember I was in the parking lot of, I'd done all these odd jobs, right? And I've been praying the whole time, right? And God's just like, wait. And I was like, but I want like the big girl job again, and like working in corporate and having this like career. And I'd had enough experience in marketing and everything that I was able to apply for these jobs. And I was in the parking lot. This is back in 2019, my very first day. And I was like, that song, Holy Spirit, you're welcome here. Come flood the place, fill the atmosphere. And I just sat there and I was like, God, fill this place. Like, I know I don't have this without you. And it was from that moment on, once again, where it's like God could see, like, that was coming from a sincere place, right? Like, I meant that. I was like, God, I know I can't do anything without you. And truly, with every single step that I would take, it was God, like, you have to be in this, or I don't want to do it. I was like, I am not taking one more step unless I know, like, you've called me to this place. And it was then where truly it's been about like 6 years or so, where one after another, like God just keeps like restoring all of these things. But it's really, I have a control problem, obviously. I want to control it. But like, I actually had to take my hands off the wheel and just be like, okay, God, I'm not going to, I'll ask for things, and I'll pray for things, and I'll seek after the Lord, and I'll seek his direction and guidance. And I'll do all of those things. But if he says no, it's okay. And that has to be okay.
Just to make light of the controlling thing, your personality's always been that way.
Really?
Just yeah. Oh, I definitely remember. Many a times in school where I'm like, she don't like that's not going her way right now.
Nope.
Nope. And that is. And that plays into the story as well. That that it is.
We're strong-willed people, all of us who want to control things, right?
Hey, makes good leaders.
Sure. Thank you.
It does.
There it is.
It makes good leaders. We struggle with a lot of different things, though. But
we do.
But it's it's on the other side for those who, not to say that you have to have like a controlling issue necessarily, but those who are not confident enough to feel like that they can control things, they kind of go on the other aspect where they're almost like belittling themselves, and they see no value or worth. So where our personalities, we may go on the prideful side, right? They end up going on the more depression side and the more, I don't
like self-sabotage and like pity a little bit more. That's a good point. So if anybody knows where that middle ground is, let us write it in the comments.
That's where we are trying to fight to stay in. So to go back on the fact that it takes a process, after asking for forgiveness and all that, I think something that we also have to remind ourselves and allow ourselves to be honest with is that, like you had talked about, where with your image might have changed, right? People might have seen you differently. The other aspect is there are consequences to it, right? So rather it's the drug, the side effects with that kind of stuff, right? And the withdrawals and everything. So there's consequences of that. But even as far as relationships, like you can wholeheartedly go to somebody, ask for forgiveness, really mean it from the bottom of your heart or whatever. And rather it's in your story or not, but rather it's intentional or not, there is some kind of hurt that person may be going through where they may not be able to either forgive you completely. Maybe they're not able to trust you the same. Maybe it becomes a trust issue from whatever it is. Like I'm broad stroking, depending on other people's stories and stuff. And so, were there any consequences that you dealt with that maybe you were hoping that it wasn't going to go that way, but you know, had to realize, well, I mean, this is a byproduct of what happened.
Yeah. So I would say when it came to after I kind of turned my life around and started, kind of making amends with people, one thing advice that I always give people and something we do in our ministry is when you're asking for forgiveness, like that's for you, right? That's for you and that's for God, right? You're not doing it in hopes that person, yes, you hope that person will forgive you,
Right.
but it's owning your side of the street. It is owning the things that you have done. So if I'm going to someone like, I just, I need to apologize. I need to ask for forgiveness. If they choose to not do that, they may have to work that out with God. That may be a longer process, right? And I will say I'm grateful. I'm blessed enough. I didn't really experience a lot of that where I was hoping that someone would forgive me and they were like, no, I'm going to need more time.
That's good.
However, I will say like you said, there are consequences and things that happened. I got divorced throughout that process.
Yeah.
And no one wants that.
Right.
I was raised where like mom and dad to this day been married 42, 43 years. Grandparents
Shout
married
out to y'all.
Yeah. Grandparents married over 50 years. Like divorce just wasn't something that it wasn't in my vocabulary
an option at all. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. Like never in a million years had I thought that would be something, but that was a consequence for my actions.
Yeah.
And our actions and the things that we were involved in. And, and that was probably one of the more heartbreaking pieces because, I never wanted that to be a thing. And I had hoped that like him and I could have some kind of friendship or something, but that's just not what could happen, which is usually not the case anyway. So I will say, it's asking for forgiveness from people is critical, but I think to keep in mind that if they don't forgive you, that's okay.
Yeah.
And that you just have to give that to God.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's helping your own personal healing and helping God work through you to at first admit that like you've wronged someone.
Yeah.
But it's for you, not for them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. And just to get to a point in your healing where you have no choice but to be okay with it, but like you're actually okay, right? Because it's one thing to be like, oh yeah, I know this is part of it or whatever, right? But still in the back of your mind, hoping that it's something different, like having to really be okay with it not being okay or not going your way. I feel like, and you could attest this or not. I feel like that's one of the biggest components of being able to continue to heal and continue to live out, because once you realize, like once we know we are not in control, once we know like God, you are like for real in control of all this stuff, you live your life a little bit different.
Oh yeah.
You think a little bit different, right? You're taking any kind of situations that could be seen as a really big L in your life, like a huge loss. You go, well, it wasn't for me.
God's got something different.
Right. Your bounce. There we go. It's probably your bounce back. Your bounce back tends to go quicker when you truly understand, man, this really is only what God sees for me or doesn't see for me.
Yeah. And one of the coolest things that God ever gave me was, it was when I had just moved into my own apartment after all this kind of craziness happened, and I was kind of starting my life over, and I started to finally get some independence, right? And I started planning out what I thought my path was going to be. And, what do they say? You make your plans and watch God laugh, because, God's plans are better.
Yeah.
And God gave me this awesome, like, revelation where it was, I will restore everything. And I was like, yes, God, amen. He goes, but I'm restoring them to my measure, not yours. Wow. And so I had to then realize, like, okay, like, what I think I want is maybe not what God wants and what will be best, because God's measure is always greater. Yeah. And we've been blessed that we get a portion of that.
For sure.
What a huge gift. And that we can just take our hands off of everything and say, Lord, I'm just going to trust that whatever it is that you've got for me is better than what I had planned.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, like, the life that I had planned about 6 years ago looks absolutely nothing to what I have right now. and I have a beautiful life.
Yeah.
And God's opened up doors for, my marriage and to raise kids and in ministry and church and a community of people that like literally in 2019, I was completely different,
Yeah.
living a good life and like following Jesus, but just trusting like, okay, God, I don't know what the rest of my life is going to look like. And that's when he was like, it's to my measure, not yours.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, and also, right, it's either all or nothing. You either got to, you've got to trust him with all of it or you're not trusting him with any of it.
Yep.
I can't say, well, I trust that, you're going to help me with my career in this way as I'm rebuilding my life. But like, I really want to date this person and I want this type of person to be my spouse. Like, so I'm going to go this way. Like nothing will work.
Yeah.
The whole thing doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, and and something like that, like it's also a process as well. Meaning, yes, it is an all or nothing. It really does need to be, all, of course. However, God, again, back to what you were saying earlier, God's gracious enough to where, all right, you will not let this go. And I'm going to get this someday, okay? But we're going to keep working on these other areas that you are letting go, right? Because God is not us. He's able to deal with all of it all at the exact same time, right? The ultimate multitasker, right?
Sounds great.
Yeah, where we're not able to do that. If we were working through something, we would say, okay, for instance, our projects and stuff like that, man, I got to get all these projects done. These are the time sensitivities to all these projects. However, I want this to go a certain way. We cannot manage it and make them all work out, right? And so in the conjunction of what we were talking about, God can manage all of it and make it work out. So even though you haven't given him full control of every aspect of your life, just know that you allowing him some aspects in some of your life will give you strength in other aspects.
Perfectly put. Yes, because it wasn't like I all of a sudden was like, okay, God, take control over all of the things all at once. No, I was holding on to little pieces. But you're right. God sees your obedience in one area, and it's like, okay. Then he kind of tugs on your heart a little bit and then you work a little hard on the next thing and on the next thing. And eventually it becomes easier to let things go. Yeah. But you're right. I can definitely see that. Yeah. It's a process.
Yeah. So let's talk about the recovery because you kind of mentioned it a couple times. So, where is your heart now? What's your passion? Because it just anytime anybody ever goes through anything, 9 times out of 10, it's like, okay, now I got a passion to make sure ain't nobody gonna go the way that I did.
Yep.
Right.
There
so and I mean, gosh, that's just So with you, where is that God has you now with that? For those of you guys that don't know, she likes to be preaching. Sometimes she be preaching if you can't tell from the podcast. And I remember as I was preparing for to have you here. I remember I ran on one of the YouTube videos of you talking about that God can use the stuff that you've gone through and has and I think the way that you had said it, you didn't say validate, you said something else, but basically you're validated to touch on that topic that God has brought you through because you've been through it, because you have an aspect and a clarity and a perspective that others like if I was to try to help anybody going through fitness stuff and all that, absolutely would make no sense whatsoever. I was never a part of that world. In fact, even when I played football in high school, I would purposely leave the workout area, go into the soccer back at high school, soccer locker room with Sean and Kevin. You remember them? Would do a whole breaking session. We'd all dance, right? Bodies bruised up, sore, sweating. Come back into the workout, come through, and they'd be like, "Hey, Alvarez, how was that workout?" "I was good," dripping sweat. And it's just like, so there's no way that I'd be able to impact anybody because I was the one trying to find ways to do not the workout and do something else. So tell us the passions and what God's doing with your story from beforehand and your passion now and the intentionality that you have behind what you're doing now.
Yeah. So back in end of 2018.
Yeah.
So I do this thing with God. It's like, it's cool. I've been doing this my whole life, except for that area, that
Right.
a small little piece of time when I was away from the Lord. Well, I write down my prayers, and essentially, like, now I've typed them out because I'm getting old and it's too hard to hold to write things anymore.
I would have said because I'm business. Okay, you know, business. We got to
There
get
we
some
go.
stuff done. More professional.
I'm efficient. Lord help me. Or lazy, one of the two. Anyway, no, I'm talking to God. It's not lazy. No, so I'll type out my prayers, and then what I do immediately after is I type out what I feel like the Lord's putting on my heart. Because I don't want to lose that or forget that, because you know, it's like he could be right. I don't know how many times, like, I don't know if this happened to you, and I'm sure it's happened to a lot of people. You're driving down the road, and like God just like throws some like awesome wisdom, and like this revelation, and then it's a couple days later, you're like, shoot, well,
dang, what was that?
Yes, like, I should have did a voice memo or something, right?
Yes.
So I do this thing where like I'll write out my prayer, write out where I kind of feel God's leading, in like a conversation. It's like a dialogue between me and God. And it was the end of 2018, and I was my uncle's a pastor, and I was in leadership at his church, and attending and like, you know, living on my own and doing really well, and like fully surrendered my life to Jesus. But I knew that everything I went through was not for nothing. Like God, you know, Romans 8:28, he will work everything out for the good, right? Like
Amen.
he will turn this around somehow, and take what the enemy had stole and take it and make it for God's glory. But I was like, I don't know what that looks like. The church that I was in, like, we didn't have anyone who dealt with, you know, addiction. We didn't have anyone who dealt with body image issues in the way that I did, or insecurities in the way that I did, coming out of the fitness industry. And I was like, well, God, I know you've placed me here. So I don't know what to do. And I wrote down this prayer, and I was just like, God, like, I want to find these women, like the ones that are broken and hopeless and helpless and addicted, and they've been, you know, basically touch the gates of hell and back, and somehow they need a sister to walk them through. You know, they need somebody. Maybe they don't have a supportive family like I did. I was incredibly blessed to have that. And so, like, what about these women, Lord? Like, where do I find them? Because I don't know where they are. I don't know where they are in my community. But I want to find the me's out there from several years ago when I was lost. And he made it very clear, and he was like, you know how God does. Like, he says he's coming soon, you know? It was one of those, like, in my time kind of answers. And, you know, I was like, okay, like, I'm going to trust. And he kind of gave me these words on what to look for. And I was like, God, I don't know what this looks like. Like, I have no idea what to do. And then I met Kelly, who's now my husband, and he was attending a church. And they had this program called Celebrate Recovery. And it's international. I think we've got something like 33 or 35,000, you know, meetings, churches that support Celebrate Recovery. And I looked into it, and I was like, these are my people. Like these are the people that God put on my heart all those years ago. And so I started getting involved in the ministry a little bit more, and like helping other women and other men. And then last year became, or the year before, became a leader of our women's addiction group. And then now I'm the ministry leader along with our like small group and recovery pastor. So it's like, my heart is absolutely in recovery. And the cool thing is, like, what we do, it's not just addiction, it's body image issues, it's struggles with food, it's grief, it's codependency, anxiety, depression, self-harm, like you name, like, we call it any hurt, habit, or hang up. I don't know about you, but we all got one of those. And it a lot of times falls into one of those categories. And so, you know, that's what I'm doing now. And that's absolutely where my heart is. And seeing, you know, I'm in relationships with a lot of these women who, you know, they came a couple of years ago, like, just broken, and felt like they had no hope, and now they're just living these beautiful lives and sponsoring other women, and like their kids are accepting Jesus as their savior. Like, these are kids that the state had taken away because of their lives, and now like they're baptizing their kids.
That's
and
so
it
dope.
is just like the Holy Spirit, like, just it just gets me so excited, because you know, and it's not me, it's not me at all. Like, God just gives me this story so that when someone new comes in, they don't feel like they're alone. You know, if they're struggling with something. And one of my good friends, she was also, and I met her through church and through the ministry, like, she was a fitness competitor and she had similar struggles, right? So now, like, we're doing life together. Like we're
Yeah.
sisters, we're doing life together. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. Yeah. Cause you're right. I don't want anyone to go through the stuff I went through, but chances are by the time you're getting into a recovery meeting, you probably already went through a lot of
Right.
that stuff. So it's like, cool. You're not alone. Like
Right.
you're not crazy.
Yep.
You know, there's no sin that's unique, right?
Yeah.
That only you're not living on an island and
That's
you're
right.
the only person on the planet that's ever struggled with this.
Yeah.
And I want women and men too, but specifically in my area, like women to know, like, nah, girl, you're good.
Yeah.
Like we can walk together through this.
Yeah. There's nothing new under the sun.
Yep.
You know, and so rather it looks different now. There's the same struggles that were happening
Right.
back during Old Testament is the same thing that's happening right
Yep.
now. Man, I love the heart of what the church really ought to do. And I'm not saying ought as in like they don't do it at all. Obviously there are churches who do it very well. But that's the hope that when I see a church, right, when I drive around and I see a church building, my hope is that they are intentionally impacting the community that they're serving.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so my pastor, him and his wife do their podcast in here, and one of the times they were talking about, you know, when somebody, because we do live Q&A, and so somebody was asking, you know, why so many churches, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And Crystal basically laid out like, you know, there's this many thousand people in this town. Can your one church serve that many thousand people? No. This is why we need more churches. This is why we need more people, because you're going to need, you know, the area that you are living and communing in and all that. They're going to need you and your story, right? The area that I'm at, they're going to need things that. And when I say need, it is not because of our own strength or who we are, right? But it is something that God specifically is working, you know, through you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love the fact that though a church may not have a resource such as yourself, if a church is healthy and they notice that there are other needs that are similar, right, to what it is that you have, then hats off to any church who's like, yes, we need to have this kind of program somewhere, because you know what? There's a good chance that we have somebody in our congregation right now who is struggling with something. However, because there is nothing that we can display that, hey, you know, this is an avenue, they may. Here's what I'm trying to say. There might be something that God is calling you to do based on your story, based on the things that He's gone through, and He needs you to speak up.
Yeah.
Because if you don't speak up, somebody else who's needing somebody who spoke up first can't speak up for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They can't be served. They can't be helped. They can't even know that there is help out there because of the fact, because, you know, you go, especially when you go to a church where like most people automatically go, you know, oh, it's Christians. Like y'all perfect. Like y'all good, you know, which side tangent, anybody who's ever has said that at all, I'm like, I don't know what Christians you've been around. Right. The Christians I've been around, we really know how whack we are.
Oh, we are hot messes.
We are very
Jesus.
aware of it. Yeah. So, you know, but anyways, but I love the fact that there's resources. I love the fact that you are courageous enough and vulnerable enough to allow your story to have an impact. What would you say to somebody who, rather they're in church or not in church, right? Because we're kind of talking about church, but where they themselves are viewing this, right? I'm going to make assumptions here. They're viewing this so that they can figure out how to help someone else. They're wanting to hear your story and go, okay, what are some practical steps, Cristina? You're telling me that, you know, I can have boundaries. You're telling me that I can love on them, but still, you know, require certain things of them. You know, but let's say it's somebody who's like, hey, they would love to get help, but they're not going to go to no church. Mm-hmm. You know, so what are some practical steps that you can give to somebody who wants to help someone else in their life?
Yeah. So I think, you know, with the recovery program we have, you know, we're a 12-step program, right? If you've heard of other 12 steps, AA, NA, right? Similar to that. Our difference is that, in some of these other 12 steps, you can pick anything as your higher power, right?
Okay.
Our higher power is identified as Jesus Christ, right? Our
Yeah.
steps are rooted in the Beatitudes. Our principles are rooted in Scripture, right? Everything we do is, it all points to Jesus.
Yeah.
But I will say that if it's one of those things that like, hey, like if someone's just like, I'm not going to anything that looks like a church. If there's the word church on the outside of a building, even for this meeting, I'm not going.
Yeah.
I would still encourage if they're struggling with, a loved one who's an addict or is dealing, not even just with drugs or alcohol, with anything,
Yeah.
or just struggling in general. Like Al-Anon is a good group, right? It's for families of those who are, in this struggle, right? Any other 12-step program is great. Those are secular ways to help,
Yep.
right? But they're still good, right? And I think that can kind of be the avenue by which, you can encourage someone to get help.
Yeah.
Also, I really just think like I've had this happen a few times where someone's been like, hey, like my friend, I told my friend about you or my daughter about you. Like they don't want to come to church. Like they're not interested in that, but could you just talk to them?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like my people know, like my story is always open.
Yeah.
Like tell any of it. None of it's in confidence. Like tell my story, pass my phone number. Just give me a heads up before I get a phone call so I know what's up.
Right.
But my phone number is always available, right?
Yeah.
Like and here's the other thing, right? It all also comes down to, is that person actively asking for help?
That's good.
Right? Because
That's
I
good.
remember when I was in my chaos, like everyone was telling my parents, like, just get in the car and drive to Chicago and go pick her up. And they were like, she is never going to speak to us again if we come and force her in a car.
That's
right?
good. Yeah.
So you can't want, and this is something we say in recovery world too, like you can't want someone else's recovery more than they want it for them, right?
Yep.
And same goes for just about any sort of stability that someone needs in their life, right? I can't want someone to be more financially free than they want to be financially free, right? Or name the thing. So I think first and foremost, it's like, is that person asking for help? And if they are, like find those people in your community, find those people in your church who, their story, their intentions, their motives, and just maybe connect them separate. They don't have to meet at a church. You can go to Panera. You can have a phone call, right? If it's someone that's really looking for help. If they're not looking for help, it's a little bit different, right?
Right.
That's when, you might be that help that person needs. And that's when you then would be great to go to some of these other meetings, go to a faith-based recovery. We've got groups for like, parents of addicts. It's like, what do I do with this?
That's so good.
Right? So it's like, if you don't know where to send them, you find those resources for yourself and maybe can get some tools to help you learn how to engage with someone like that.
Yeah.
And how to help them.
Yeah, that's good. That's because I was gonna. That was kind of where my mind was wondering. I was like, well, what about for those who just they're not going to ask for help at all, and how can they get a part? How can they equip themselves? Because I mean, essentially, that's what it is that you're trying to do when you're trying to figure this stuff out. Okay, here's my hope. Sorry, I don't want to make assumptions. I don't want to make so many. My assumption is that when somebody says I have somebody that I really want to help, my assumption is that you're not going there to change them for you. You're trying to help them change for themselves, right? That's my hope. So I don't want to make that assumption. So my assumption is that somebody has that mindset. So like to know that you are equipping yourself, right? If we were going to have a debate on, some kind of current topic of some sort, it would do no good for me to just go there and start talking and hoping that I hit a point, right? It would be better that I did the research. And at the same time, it also would be beneficial of when I do the research that I don't just go spewing it all off and I actually talk to others who are involved with whatever it is that I'm trying to help somebody out with, right? I'm going in and out of analogy here, but if I'm wanting to help somebody with body image of some sort and I'm learning about all these body image things, the last thing you want to do is take some kind of stat to somebody and be like, well, if according to this many percentage of women feel this way. So, honey, just letting you know, you still look good, baby.
You're not alone.
Okay, everybody else feels this way too. Like, that don't help
No.
at all.
No.
So it's good to learn those things and at least have some kind of reference. But at the same time, it's even better to have the conversation of like, okay, let me talk to somebody who's actually gone through this before. And if I don't have access to somebody physically, God, we live in a very digital world that I think it's such a lame excuse to be like, well, I just don't know anybody. I know not everybody responds to DMs. Some people get weird, so I don't either. But like there are people, there are resources, there are websites, there are churches. Like even if you go to a church and be like straight up honest, like, hey, I promise you, my daughter, my son is not going to do nothing with church at all. Is there any resource outside? 9 times out of 10, they know somebody else.
Absolutely.
Or like kind of like to your point, or they'll be like, hey, I'll meet with them. We can meet at Chick-fil-A. We can meet wherever you want, and I ain't never got to talk about church at all to them. And allow that prompting.
Yeah, and I've done that before with a young girl who wasn't interested in going to church, didn't want to come to youth group, and it was like her dad was like, can you just meet with her?
Yeah,
I didn't talk about Jesus the whole time at all. Didn't mention it once. We just hung out. We went and got pedicures. We got some tea. We like hung out, right? But it's just like, okay, is that enough that like you're planting the seed, right?
Yes.
And also, right, it's not, that's not the blanket statement, right?
Right.
Sometimes you feel the Lord tugging on your heart, like you absolutely do need to call this out, right?
Yeah.
But if it's someone who's really struggling, that's when you have to take the time and equip yourself, like you said, and prayer and scripture and word, and like let that stuff sink in so that you can speak, you can be the voice of Jesus, right? Without even ever saying Amen. Jesus, and without ever even bringing someone into church if they don't want to go.
Yeah. And to anybody who has a heart for helping, make sure you don't see them as a project.
Yes.
Right? Because that'll be felt automatically.
Yeah.
I do some ministry. It's called Grand Rapids Dream Center up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and like the biggest reason why I see so much impact there is because don't nobody feel like a project. Nobody feels like, oh, this is another organization coming here. They're going to chill here for like 2 weeks and then they're going to be out. So that a person can feel when it's like, you're trying to change me. Right. So I love that. I love the practical of like, no, just hang out, just show some love and consistency and be in it for the long haul.
So that's the other thing, right? If you're going to start something, it can't just be fun for a little while. And that's something that I've struggled with too, because it's like, you meet somebody and they're wanting help and it's like, like go gung ho. Yeah. And then if they start, their motivation starts to wane because, it's hard, right? Yeah. If you're dealing with these big struggles in your life and you're trying to get closer to God, this person is, but they're new and maybe they stumble or kind of fall away a little bit. Like I got to be on the ball to stay consistent and not just be like, meh.
Yeah.
I'm busy anyway. Like we don't have to get together. Like I'm busy anyway. And that's something that I honestly is like is a struggle because I have such a passion, but then it's also like, where's that balance too, right? That ministry, work, life, family, marriage balance so that like you're doing everything sincerely and your motivations are pure. And you're still taking time to like have your own relationship with God, and that if that's not where it needs to be, like at least in the recovery world, we say like your recovery needs to be like pretty spot on before you start trying to help a bunch of other people.
That's it.
Like you need to, and again, we're always growing, we're always improving. We're never gonna be perfect. Making sure like we're in a solid, good place as we're walking someone else through it, because like you said, consistency, because you can't just do it for a couple of weeks,
right? And
then be like, okay, well they're good. Like I'm gonna leave them. You got to stick around.
Yeah. I love that. You got to know yourself. You have to be so self-aware. Gosh, I just had a meeting with my parents on my gymnastics meeting and stuff, and had a whole Google Doc. Long story short, to the parents, there's a certain thing of be self-aware of your athlete, know their limitations, don't see them as something that they're not. Right? It puts unwanted pressure on them, and then obviously to the athletes, be self-aware. You got to know who you are. If you're not a hard worker, if you're not good with consistency, the second you say you're going to try to help somebody and meet with them, you better have a great calendar. You better have a process where you're already used to checking on things and all that, because here's what I would hate. I would hate for somebody to hear something like this and hear your story and be like, oh my gosh, like I want to change the world. Like, yay. Like, that's great. Cool. Is there anything in your life right now that is showing you that you are structured in a way that you can take on somebody else?
Yes.
Because that's a responsibility. Like, another human life is a whole, especially when we as Christians are mandated to love the whole person, start to finish. Right, rather it's the beginning of their walk with Christ, rather their ins and outs with Christ, whatever the case is. And so, if your life is not structured in such a way that you can take on someone else, the worry is, and I don't want to put any pressure on anybody, false pressure either, but the worry is you can accidentally turn somebody away from God because of your inconsistencies.
Oh, yeah.
The way that you may not be set up and structured. Now, am I saying that you got to be perfect at all, before it? No, absolutely not. We're not. Yeah. Neither one of us is saying that. But you do want to have some kind of a lifestyle and community too. Like, okay, so you're doing some one-on-ones, but would you agree that maybe somebody who's like, but I don't really know if I have enough words to say, like, bring a friend then.
Yeah.
Bring another person that's at the same point, further along, whatever the case may be, and be like, hey, I want to do this. Because essentially what we're touching on here is discipleship. That's what true discipleship is.
Yes.
You go
I was just going to say.
And be involved. No, well, then go ahead. I'm going to let you. Go ahead. Go ahead, girl.
No,
I'm talking to you.
You're right. You're spot on, because I think there can be a middle ground between like the Sunday morning, come into a big church, no one knows your name, you can kind of sneak in and sneak out.
Yeah.
For some people, right? That might be what they do. But then they're not really comfortable just meeting one-on-one with the person, because that feels like therapy or a counseling session, and that can be intimidating, right? Especially if you don't know them that well.
Yeah.
So the in between are smaller fellowships. It's small groups. It's small meetings. It's getting together. I mean, we do this with our girls. Like we went to like a painting thing, right? Where like 6 to 10 of us girls just went out and like hung out, right? And so I think there are smaller, more digestible ways sometimes. And again, it all depends on the person, right? Depending on what they need. But I think you have to be flexible and you have to be creative on how you're going to do this, right? Does this person really like, I don't know, concerts or something? Well, like get them out, go do something, right? Yeah. Fellowship is huge. And there's also something else I was going to say, and then my brain just lost it. Darn it, I hate it when that.
You're good. I probably went on for too long.
No, you're good. I remember now. When you said about putting it on your calendar, right? To your point, we have to know our own limitations. I know that I live and die by my calendar. I've got like 7 calendars on one calendar, and then I got like the kids' I've got like all of these calendars.
Yeah.
So I know that I have to put those important conversations with people in spots, right? I know that I do really well with consistency, and I know, especially when someone is getting ready to start their life over, right? Or they're coming out of a really difficult season in their life.
Yep.
They've probably not had any consistency.
Amen.
Right? People who are like struggling and they're trying to like turn their life around, like consistency is often non-existent.
Yep.
So how do you start that, right? If someone's actually actively looking for help, it's like, put it on a calendar. This time every day, you call me.
Yep.
And I make sure that I'm available. Like I've got that time and more blocked off for this person, and then over time, it might be the first couple times they forget to call. So I shoot a quick text, right? But then over time, I mean, there's been some people that I've talked to every single week for months, and we get meet at the same time on the phone every week at this time. And in the beginning, it wasn't as consistent because they're still learning how to do that.
Right.
So I think, and also building that into my life so that I keep a healthy relationship with that person.
Yep.
That, I may not be available 24 hours a day, and that's okay. Right. But you have my word that this time I'm devoting to you, right, to help you grow and to, like you said, like looking at discipleship that way.
Well, I love that that tries to almost help prevent the codependency.
Oh yeah,
for sure. But I love the fact that you're like, I'm going to have this blocked out, but you have to put it on their court to make them be accountable for themselves. Yeah. You hit me up. Man, that's so good, because I think sometimes when it comes to helping people, we can almost become the parent where they're like helicopter parent.
Oh yeah.
where they're trying so hard to help equip this person as much as possible in every aspect. And then when they finally go on their own, everything falls apart because you've been there every step of the way.
Or they take it personal when that person doesn't follow their advice.
Yes.
You know, it's like, well, what did I do wrong? What did I say wrong? I must not be a good enough friend. I didn't do something right. It's like, no, it could have been that they just made a bad call.
Yeah.
And they're, you know, they're following their path. You can't control that. So, and because then you know, yes, we were supposed to bear each other's burdens, right? As scripture says, but I also think there's a healthy way to do that. Because I think a lot of times if you get into a lot of those relationships and conversations, you start to take on that burden more than they are.
Yeah.
And no, like these people, if they're wanting help, like you gotta train them a little bit. And I don't say train in like a bad way, but these are new concepts like that they may have never tried before. I know there were things that I did for the very first time that I'd never tried before when I was getting my life in order. And I heard from other mentors and spiritual advisors and other sisters in Christ, like, hey, this is what's worked for me. And I was like, cool, I ain't got nothing to lose. Let me try it. You know, like I literally have nothing to lose. I've lost everything.
Yeah.
But you don't know those things unless you share.
That's
so,
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. That's so good. Well, I know I could go forever, and I want to be mindful of time. So it's been a pleasure to hear your story, you know, because like I said on the front end, you know, we've known each other for so many years. The portion of time where our lives actually crossed was actually shorter, but it felt like, oh yeah, I've known this person. Oh no, I have not known that person for that long. Never mind. But it feels like it's been forever. And so even though to still feel that way and still have the friendship, I never got a chance to hear, you know, this stuff. And so even the little snippets when that you gave me, even when I was helping you move, you know, to an apartment, like it was. I think it was actually that moment where it was like plugged in of like, I want to know more. Now, it's been several years since then, but still, I'm like, I want to know more because of the fact that I knew who you were as a person when we first met. I saw from afar the different aspects of the broadcasting and everything else, you know, and so it was like literally I got a beginning, a very small middle. And then
hey, started my life over.
I mean, essentially, it's just,
literally,
it's like, hey.
So what happened?
Yes. So this has been, I know this has been very, very good for me to be able to hear your heart and all that. But obviously, my prayer is that everybody who's viewing and watching on the replay and that they'll be able to use your story, to use this, and if nothing else, drop it as a link to somebody and be like, hey, just check this out. Just if you want to have a conversation after that, let's go ahead. You know, we'll meet me up. Go ahead and text me.
Yeah.
But if you would at least check this out, I think that'd be super beneficial. So I thank you for your story. And
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know it's one of those things, right? Like again, I've learned because of God, right? It's okay to be open and honest about your story, right? It's meant to help someone else, and truthfully, right, it's all God that's done it. I've now shifted from I'm doing all the work, I'm at the gym, I'm doing the job, to no, literally this is all God. He gets all the credit. So thanks for letting me share today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. I actually, so now that you said that, only because we had a small conversation, I do want to kind of hit on this. This is one thing I did want to hit. You said something that was interesting when we were on the phone prepping for this. You were telling me that now, because of everything that has happened before, trying to get back into fitness is not the same for you.
Oh no.
And so I do want to hit that because I think that is kind of the end story that some may need to hear from, where let's say, again, it's something like this. Obviously, we're not talking about any other addictions or whatever, but let's say it's something like this where it in and of itself is actually a good thing. It was just done in a bad way. Yeah.
So like I said, like it got pretty unhealthy, and it was my identity, and I was doing it for all the wrong reasons. It was, for attention, right? Like you thrive on that. And back then, again, like I said, social media wasn't a thing, but it's the likes, it's the comments, it's the, oh my gosh, you're in a magazine and all of that. Like it was this, just boosting my ego nonstop. And I'm like, oh, well, the more I go to the gym and the more this happens. And although at the time, right, I didn't recognize that that's why I was enjoying it, right? I was completely blinded to that being the reason why. But now, several years later, my metabolism isn't what it used to be. Thank you, late 30s. And so now it's, when I quit going to the gym and quit competing, like I just never went back. And that was several years ago. Like I just stopped completely, didn't stop competing.
Yeah.
Only I also just quit the gym. And so now I'm getting older. I'm raising kids. My health needs to be a priority.
Yeah.
And I've seen my weight fluctuate and this is a whole nother topic, but dealing within the insecurity is like, I look at pictures of where I was, 10 years ago and I'm like, I do not look like that. Like that is a whole nother person.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
It is a whole new, that was a whole different person.
Yeah.
Also, that person was completely broken, right?
Right.
So as much as I would
part.
love to look like how she used to, oh man, she was a hot mess. Like I would take the stability and my faith over that image. But now to go back to the gym and to start working out, it's been very hard.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at now, where, I've been paying for a gym membership. They think I'm going. Someone thinks I'm going. I'm kidding.
Somebody taking my money. It's okay.
Somebody's taking my money. Club Fitness they're doing great. But I'm having to find that motivation again.
Yeah.
Like to do it because it's for my health.
Yeah.
And being okay with the fact that I don't look like everybody else in the gym. I'm not the fittest woman in the gym anymore. And it tripped me up for a while because I would walk in, I'm like, and back when I first tried to go back to the gym several years ago, I would see people in there that knew me from my fitness days. And I'm like, oh,
it's different.
Even just anywhere. I'm like, oh man, like these people know what I used to be able to do and what I used to look like. And I look nothing like that anymore. And so I've had to work through a lot of those insecurities. Like, girl, like none of that matters. I have to tell myself that none of that matters. Like, who cares? Yeah. Like, are you healthy? Are you, you're full of joy. You've got this beautiful life. Like, none of that stuff matters. Yeah. So now it's really like this next step. And this, I'm glad we're having this conversation. I should probably go to the gym after this.
Come on, accountability. Okay.
I'm getting hot in here now. I don't want to go. But that is truly like the next part of my like healing, I feel, because I don't think I'm there yet, like in full honesty, right? And I think that's okay to say that. Right? Yeah. God's worked a lot of healing out of my life, and I'm not quite there yet with that last piece because, I have great memories, right? Yeah. Great friends, I have great memories when things weren't bad. Things were so good and fun and enjoyable and fulfilling. And I'm like, I go there now and I don't feel that. Because I'm also like, I'm not doing it for a purpose other than what should be the most important purpose. I don't know, being healthy.
Yeah.
Right. So that's really where my struggle is now. But I've got another friend, like I mentioned her before, who was she was competing, and she's finally kind of figured out that same thing where we both were like, I don't want to go. I'm feeling like some kind of way about going to the gym. Like, I don't want to see these people. I don't want them to see me. I don't want to, grab the 10-pound weights when I used to grab 30s. Yeah. Like, that is demoralizing, Yeah. So now it's going into the gym and being like, those are all lies from the enemy. Like, wow. I don't need any of that stuff I was seeking before.
Wow.
So yeah, that's my goal now, is to change the way I see the gym.
Amen.
I've been in there now though, so
hey,
I'm starting.
Hey, come on now. No, I love that. I love that. I love the fact that it's like, hey, there's going to be some more mental warfare, emotional, whatever mindset, but the commitment to do it again for health reasons for yourself, and the commitment to be like, no, this is part of the healing process. This is for lack of better words, this is the closure that I need to my story, where it's like, and I'm back to doing it, but doing it the right way. So I think that's important. I mean, obviously, again, it's to something that is healthy and it is good. So we're not talking about somebody to be like, hey, now you can go back to drinking the way that you were doing before, like, or going back to bars. No, there's certain things that you might have to cut off and be done with it.
Yeah. Like, I'm never competing again. Like this, this is just,
well, that's a good point.
Like no.
That's a good point, because somebody could be like, oh, well, then now you could do it and be in a better way of doing it.
Yeah. Now you can do it healthy, and you'll be in a different class now. And like the industry has changed over the last 7 years. So, maybe there's a better spot for you. And I'm like, I know my personality, right? I know that like if I'm going to do something, like I go all or nothing.
Yep.
So now it's like, how do I say that I'm going all or nothing, but it has to look different than it looked before? All or nothing means for my health and my future and my well-being and just being, general health and wellness now, right? And that's harder to identify than stepping up on a stage and getting a trophy.
Yeah.
There is no end goal with staying like just healthy to be healthy. So I'm now wrapping my head around what that looks like. And actually my biggest motivation now is my husband, because, I used to train competitors and all of that too. And he wanted to get in shape and lose some weight. And like, he has killed it. Like I was telling you before, he gets up and goes to the gym at like 4:30 in the morning. I ain't doing that. I will not go that hard into it. But I've seen him be so motivated, and just because it was good for his health. Yeah. I was like, so that's how you're supposed to do it. So little by little, it's a process.
That's good.
It's a process.
That's good. Well, thank you for sharing that and sharing your story. And I definitely wanted to add that part in there, because I think that's important to see that this isn't now just you going and trying to help people out of stuff, but also still actively living it in your life of how to continue to heal, how to continue to find better ways to do things, again, to do the good things in a better way.
In a better way. Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's awesome. Well, thank you again so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. Hey, if you liked any of this content and you found some value in it, make sure that you like, subscribe, and of course, share it. Also, if you're interested in some more, go ahead and check out these videos. Till next time, grace and peace. Adios.